What's goody, man? Islam, 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 everybody. It's the God, Tamma-Re, El-Bey. It's the God. How y'all doing out here? Today, we're going to touch a real, I believe it's going to be a real touchy topic for my people, because it kind of like exposed really how vulnerable we have been, and it really exposed a lot of these so-called black leaders and figures, that society has hoisted a prompt up in front of us. These guys, what I'm saying, and most of them was people y'all learn about every year come February, the so-called quote-unquote Black History, So we're gonna dig into the let me remove my beautiful, damn, look good. Let me remove my beautiful mug, and we're gonna dig into today the General Education Board, right? Now, I usually like to let either Cortana, or I'll read myself and read the books of whatever I'm speaking on. I usually like to read it, but today, by this being so much information, I'm just gonna kind of like freestyle and dig into it because I read the book, and you can download the book. It's free online. It's called The General Education Board and an account of its activities from 1902 to 1914. And it was published a year later in New York in 1915. So it kind of like it's fairly pretty much accurate as opposed to the type of things they was involving itself in. So to make a long story short, I'm gonna give an account of how we get to where we are now. And in order to understand this, how you doing, Khalil? How you doing, Khalil? You want to say hi? Say hey. Okay, son. Daddy making a video, so you're gonna have to be quiet, okay? All right. So that's my son, everyone. So in order for us to understand what happened, I think we gotta travel back to 1802, I believe it was. And that was the Haitian Revolution. And because of the Haitian Revolution, uh, so-called white Southerners here in America start beginning to be fearful of what happened in Haiti from Toussaint, and how they revolt and they kind of like ran Europeans off the land and took their land back and created the first quote unquote Black Republic in the Western Hemisphere, I believe. Nonetheless, that brought a lot of fear in Europeans' minds and hearts because they never really thought that some quote unquote Negroes somewhere would uh, uprise and overthrow any European domination or facet. So it was real alarming. So I want to say maybe in 1819, uh, states started passing anti-literacy laws. And when you look up the anti-literacy laws, you know, it just made it illegal for uh, slaves to read and write. You know, and it was punishable by 100 pounds uh, imprisonment for Europeans and by whippings or even debt for Moorish people. So, as a result of the anti literacy laws, that lasted from, I want to say, 1819 to maybe 1849 or maybe 1847, something like that. I'm not sure, but it was somewhere in that area, maybe about 10, 11 years before uh, Civil War and all that type of stuff. So we're going to pick up from maybe that area. No, I skipped a lot because it started in 1819 when he started passing the anti-literacy laws, but they didn't get real funky with passing the laws until in 1829, I believe, David Walker's an appeal to the colored citizens of the world. And he wrote a book appealing to all the so-called colored people to uprise and overthrow the oppressor. So, and 2 years after that, in 1831, that was Nat Turner's slave rebellion. So you can imagine, and even 7 years before David Walker's An Appeal to the Colored Citizens of the World was uh was published, uh, they had a guy named Denmark Vesey in North Carolina that supposedly had planned this big slave revolt, and uh, but their plan was foiled some kind of way, and he wound up getting hung, him and a few other people, and you know, so at that time, when they were passing these anti-literacy laws, you know, it was two things going on because if you understand, Reconstruction haven't started yet, so a lot of our people get the time errors kind of mixed up, and they think that the anti-literacy laws was a result of Reconstruction when they was changing the language and doing all kind of stuff, creating legalese and you know the 14th Amendment and all that type of stuff. That's not accurate because the anti-literacy laws was before that, but it was a result of fear mongering going on in the European community. They was really afraid of a uproar, a revolt, you know, people trying to take their freedom back. Nonetheless, you know, we move forward and we have the Civil War and we have Reconstruction and the emancipation of the so-called black man. So now it's okay for us to learn again. Okay, who you think stepped in to fill that learning curve when we had to learn again? It pretty much was the same people that was teaching us in the beginning, whatever they was teaching us, because you if you understood like little European children who had learned lessons at school while playing with their little slave friends, that's how they taught them, and opposed to that, you know, uh churches was the main way we learned. So most of it, 100% of the so-called black man epistemology comes from some kind of religious order at some form of fashion. You know what I'm saying? It come from some religion, whether it was the Quakers or the Puritans or the Baptists, or the Dutch masters. That's how people, so-called people of color, learn and got their education during those times. Okay, so you could pretty much say prior to the anti-literacy laws, that's how we learn, and during the anti-literacy laws, there are documentation of some religious orders and some uh, slaveholders getting arrested or fined or something like that for disobeying the laws and still teaching their slaves how to read and write anyway. And definitely post Civil War and Reconstruction, we learned pretty much from the church. So you could say the church is 100% responsible for the epistemology of the so-called black man. And that's real deep when you think about it, because it really tells you a lot about why the so-called black man never give up Christianity. They'll never give up believing in the so-called white man God, because that's the epistemology. That's all they really know. That was all that was really taught to them. So from 1861 pretty much to 1902, the Southern Baptist Association, if I'm saying that right, they had they had picked up the ball on education in America, but they had some kind of, they had a few things that kind of like prevented them from kind of winning the hearts of everybody, because naturally they discriminated, you know what I'm saying? They didn't educate people from other religions. They didn't educate, and they stayed segregated for the most part. They didn't educate so-called people of color. So it saw opportunity for this guy, David D. Rockefeller, to start the, the General Education Board. So this here is when everything takes a change, and this here is the birth of the American, should I say, the United States public school system as we know it today. And it's really deep, man, because this guy right here, man, this guy right here, he, man, slicker than fish grease, you heard me? Like, I don't even know how to put it in words how he was able to pretty much donate damn near like $100 million during the course of, I want to say the book was just for 12 years from 1902 to 1914. So between the course of 12 years, he donated like $100 million, and that was back then at the turn of the 19th century. So $100 million right now today is, man. So just think back then, that was like saying that was saying something. But when he donated it with a sense of we gonna control shit. You see what I'm saying? And it's crazy because when you read this book, you see they tell you the officers and the members of the General Education Board. And when you go and you read the members and the officers, right? All of these people, none of these people are so-called quote unquote black. None of them. Not one of them people that sat on that board was so-called black. But as you can see, chapter 8 was all about the Negro education. So these boards and members of the General Board, General Education Board, these are the people that felt like they knew what's best for and what the best thing to do for the Negro education. See, and I respect it if it was our own mothers and fathers that came together and said we want to do this, but it wasn't. It was some Europeans somewhere that sat down and came up with ideas of how they was going to so-called educate. And when I say educate, they right. They wanted to give y'all an education. As a matter of fact, the book said in every sense of the word education. And let me give you the definition of education for those who don't know. Some of y'all may know. Some of y'all may know. But for those who don't know, education is a noun. One, the process of receiving or giving systematic instruction, especially at a school or university. And the synonyms for education is training, indoctrination, right? And for those who don't know what they should have, they shouldn't be concerned with an education. I know it sounds weird what I'm saying to y'all. I ain't gonna use weird, but I know it sounds strange what I'm saying to y'all. But y'all shouldn't worry about an education because the education is systematic instruction. See, in this book, these guys pretty much admitted that they had greater knowledge than they was offering to the people. But they wanted the people to feel like they was getting somewhere too. But this guy here, David Rockefeller, John D. Rockefeller, I'm on to say, he said he didn't want a nation of thinkers. He said he wanted a nation of workers. And when you think about it, it's so easy to see that that's really what they want, because how many companies out there that have a successful background as being profitable companies? If they really wanted the people to understand how to be prosperous, then that's what they should be educating people with. They should have them top companies like your Amazons and your Walmarts and all that type of stuff come teach everyone how to be prosperous. But that ain't the game. That's all the game, really, should I say. That ain't what they own. What they own is having you work for Walmart and Amazon. That's what they own. So I'm gonna get kind of deep into it, and it's gonna hurt a lot of our people feelings because, like I said, some of them so-called black leaders, like Booker T. Washington and James Hardy Dillard, well, he not even black, quote unquote. He not even black. And that's another thing should kind of raise my people intuition, because these people like James Hardy Dillard got a university in my so-called hometown, New Orleans, Louisiana, Dillard University, and it's supposed to be an all quote-unquote black university, but that's a European. The same way like Spelman in Atlanta is supposed to be an all black quote-unquote women's university, but it's named after Rockefeller's wife. And Morehouse supposed to be a quote-unquote black university, but it's named after her brother. You see what I'm saying? So all these things should rub you wrong, man. Like, if you really get what I'm saying, and to, really dig into it, I don't want people to think that when they read this book, because you can read this book yourself. It's gonna take you maybe about 6.5 hours to read the whole book if you're a good reader, right? But you're gonna learn when you read this book that, for one, they considered you as a problem. They had strategies to deal with the Negro problem, for one. For two, you're gonna realize that they say you can't have an education that's not supervised by the quote unquote white man. You're gonna realize, number three, for those for those of y'all who like to say, use excuses and shit, like that was back in the days and that was a long time ago and things changed. You're gonna see that they wrote up in the endowment, in the trust, they wrote up that they would have perpetual succession. You know what that means, perpetual succession? That means somebody else had to succeed them after they die or leave or get too ill to hold a position on the board. That means somebody else had to succeed them and follow their plans. And if any of y'all know about how these companies do, they write 100-year, 500 years, sometimes even 1,000-year plan. You see what I'm saying? And it all be wrote up in the trust. And that's another thing I want y'all to read the book and pay attention to, how all these endowments and foundations was being set up. They was using trust. You see what I'm saying? They wasn't using no quote unquote money. They was using trust to pay for all this. So it's a lot of things that kind of rub me wrong when you read this book because you can see like the master slave mentality of the people who, as opposed, all right, the people who was making the rules, who was creating this board, and the board on the very first page they said it's a corporation. So everybody know corporations in business to make money. You know what I'm saying? And page 4, they said all the things that was necessary for the corporation. On page 5, they said they want to take over every phase of social and education life in America. So it is not just about education. They knew that it was going to spew over into the social life because if you train these people to believe what they think they know, then that's what they're going to think they know. So anything outside of that would be like trying to convince a baby to eat a steak. So they had all kind of universities that was involved. Booker T. Washington was involved at Tuskegee. He uh he teamed up with what's her name? Anna T. Jeans. She was a Quaker philanthropist. See how we going right back to religion? Well, she was a Quaker philanthropist that donated $200,000 to the Negroes' education and all this type of things. And another thing kind of pissed me off too is because when you read this book, you see that, like I said, John D. Rockefeller, uh, he pledged millions, and you seen for the so-called white education, they were sparing no expense, but for the build a school for a so-called quote-unquote Negro, you know what I'm saying, they'll have things, and I'm just guesstimating, but you can go back and check the accurate numbers because trust me, in this book, they ain't guessing at nothing. They had accurate numbers. They knew how much everybody was making and everything from plants. And man, the book is so much deeper than just education because it deal with the plant, the relationship of the farmers in the school. It deals with the relationship of the hospitals with the school. It deals with the relationship of the government and the hospitals in the school. It deals with the Department of Agriculture. It deal with, oh man, they had a guy, what's his name? I can't forget his name. Dr. Knapp. On page 28 of the book, Dr. Knapp said, don't mistake a man from a crow because neither one of them can count past 3. You got to feel me on this, man. These people think we are stupid. They think we are ignorant. They never thought that we'll start figuring some of this stuff out that we figuring out. And when you pay attention to the public school system and the so-called universities and colleges, the way that they operate today, you will see that the blueprint for how they operate today is right here in this General Board Education manifesto. It's amazing to me how well it worked and how they was able to pull it off. But the only reason they was able to pull it off in our communities anyway is because they had so-called black leaders that was working with them. Booker T. Washington, W.E.B. Du Bois, and these people didn't hold a tongue. They call these people exactly what they were. They called them agents. They say all of these people are agents and they're working with me. So you know what happened, maybe this was from 1902 to 1914. You know, maybe 20 years later, what happened with Tuskegee Institute, you know, what they got caught doing. And it's none of this stuff is a coincidence, man. I just want my people to stop being naive and thinking that, you know, that everybody who they think so-called black hero was really a hero. Nah. And don't get me wrong, even in the book, they said that the so-called Negro agents took their job with a sense of pride because some of them actually thought they was helping their people. But the ones at the top of the tree, the ones that's supposed to be so educated, you know, are supposed to be so knowledgeable, should I say, like I ain't buying that y'all ain't know. I'm not buying that shit. I know that if like me, I'm a dude from out the Calio projects, straight up and down, my G. And if I could sit down and read these damn books and figure it out and learn about these different disciplines and put everything together, I know they could have. I know they had access to countless books and laboratories, and I don't even have a laboratory. I wish I did. But me, I do have a studio, so I'm gonna make it work, baby. The studio is my lab for right now, but I love to get like Inky or one of these dudes to get me a microscope. I love to give me a microscope, my G, and start looking at some chromosomes and shit. You dig? But nonetheless, man, yeah, man, like, and you know, everybody is related to everything. Everything is related to everything in these books. I could just go through the context for you right now. You know what I'm saying? See, because they told you about the members in the officers. Then they did a little introductory note. Then they did the history of the education board, a little short history, the resources and the expenditures. That's when they tell you about John D. Rockefeller and how he gave so much and this and that. And then in the footnotes, they'll tell you that, hey, he gave this stuff, but we can't tell you about to what extent we could use this money. We had to take that out. Y'all can't see what the guidelines to being able to use the money. So it wasn't like, hey, you could just give it to them freely. Like they had guidelines. You know, they wasn't giving no money to nobody who wasn't trying to hit at they was superior shit. You know, they wasn't giving money to no people like that. So at the end of the day, man, like it's real sad if you ask me that, you know, my people have so much influence in their everyday life by people who don't really give a shit about them. So it's hard to teach my people that they have been trained to be subservient to another group of people because they don't believe that. They don't believe that they've been trained to be subservient to another group of people. But and don't get me wrong too, Europeans too. I mean, they pretty much say we dumbing down everybody. Now you can get a a higher education, quote unquote, or you can get erudition, You know what I'm saying? If you do it privately or if you self-educate yourself. But they said as far as the Negro, they wanted us confined to public school. They didn't they didn't want private school even an option for us. And if we was to get too smart and figure it out and say, hey, we want a private school too, they say, cool, let them open that up. But we ain't gonna really give them no knowledge to deal with, you know, and we're gonna make sure they don't figure nothing out neither, because everything that they do is gonna be under our microscope. And it hurted me to see, like I was saying, we had to pull ourselves up by the bootstrap because John D. Rockefeller was putting money into the so-called quote unquote white schools, but for one of our schools, say the price of it was $30,000, they'll donate something like $1,800 and say tell us to try to come up with the rest, and then we'll come up with the rest because we wanted our children to be able to compete too. And then when we come up with the rest, then we turn the school over to the state, and then the state let school go, or either that'll happen, or either we'll be in a position where we start dealing with real knowledge and learning, and all of a sudden the school get burnt down, or just all kind of shit. You know how them people do. You know how they like you know, that's how they do. But at the end of the day, man, this here for us. Like, we need to know, man. We need to learn that we don't need Europeans. You know what I'm saying? We don't need none of their ideologies. We don't need nothing for them from them. All we need from them is really to get up off our land. You know what I'm saying? That's all we need from Europeans. Like, and I know that ain't gonna come without a price, but that's what we need from Europeans. We don't need nothing else from them. We don't need nothing else from them. Nothing. You see what I'm saying? But if you ask some of our people, like, they believe that this their world. Like, they need to wake up, man. And at the end of the day, we are waking up. So yeah, it's a little quick synopsis on the General Board of Education, and I'm gonna get more into it as time go by. But I just wanted to put this out here and kind of like let my people know, man. Like, excuse me, with all the odds against us, we still did just as good or even better than them. You know what I'm saying? So don't think at all for 1 minute, excuse me, that you uh inferior to anybody. You know what I'm saying? Don't think for 1 second you inferior to anybody. You know what I'm saying? They know what you possess. They know the God powers that you possess. They just don't want you to know that. Once you figure that out, game over. And once we as a whole unified, collectively unified, game really over. You know what I'm saying? So stop letting the things that you disagree on separate y'all, and start letting the things that y'all do have in common unite y'all. And all the other things that get worked out in the rest. It get worked out in the end, man. Signing off. Tamma-Re El-Bey. Peace and love.